The NHL is back from the Four Nations break, and so are we. You're tuning into Up in the Blue Seats, your favorite Rangers podcast from the New York Post. We missed you all and hope you missed us. We're sure you missed this crazy Rangers season as well. That is only getting crazier. To recap, the Rangers had 6 players in the Four Nations tournament, and since they've returned to the regular season, they've lost 8-2 to the Sabres, beat the Penguins 5-3, and beat the Islanders 5-1. Before we get into that, we've got some injury news. Adam Fox was put on injured reserve Wednesday night with an upper body injury that he suffered in the Islander game. Obviously a tough blow to the Rangers back end, but the expectation is that he'll be back before the end of the regular season. The way it was phrased is that, he'll be back for the stretch run of the season, but obviously this is the stretch run. So just a tough loss at a tough time. I guess we'll just start there. I mean, Larry, how do you see this loss of Adam Fox for the Rangers?
Listen, he's led the team in minutes for the last 5 seasons. He's on in every key situation. So it's a major loss. There's no question about that. They're moving a lefty over to the right. Vakanainen is now gonna start on the right with Ryan Lindgren. So we'll see how that goes. My overview on it, though, is that I hope this injury doesn't change the Rangers or Chris Drury's intentions going into the trade deadline. I hope they don't now go out and try and replace him, try and get a rental, or they hang on to players because they need more, they need fortification on D. And I get it. You don't want to cut the team off at the knees, but if they can get a second rounder for Ryan Lindgren, that's what they need to do, regardless of whether Adam Fox is in the lineup or not. I just hope that this injury doesn't change their approach to the deadline.
Can you separate those two things? Like, can't you just, maybe because they're different players, right? And maybe don't go out and if your intention is to move on from Ryan Lindgren and get something for him, are you saying like don't do it for whatever this fill-in, this stopgap is for Adam Fox? Do this for the future. Like I can get on board with that for sure.
I think if they can get a second round draft pick for Ryan Lindgren, that's what they should do, regardless of who is in or out of the lineup. But I see the other side that Chris Drury may feel an obligation to this group. And I'm not suggesting it's easy. But my view is they need to fortify themselves for next year ahead of what they need to do for this year. I just don't see that this team has 16 playoff wins in it. I don't see they have 12 playoff wins in it. I don't see they have 8 playoff wins in it. So I'm not doing stopgap measures this season. I think they need to be sellers as much as they can, and that doesn't mean tearing down the team. It means being strategic with their impending free agents. They need to move Riley Smith. I'd like to see them move Riley Smith sooner than later. Look, he's a good player. He's had a good career, I think he has value to cup contenders. But I would like to see Brennan Othmann get the time, that Riley Smith is now taking up, or a lot of those minutes. And Jimmy Vesey, he's probably not in their plans for next season. I'm perfectly fine with having Jimmy Vesey on the Rangers next year. But if they're not looking toward that, then they need to move him too before the deadline. So I just don't want them to go through the season with their impending free agents still on the roster after the deadline.
That makes sense. I think that if they have a silver lining in any of this. You can maybe get some power play time for Jones or for, whomever, really. If they're going to do the 5 forwards, who knows what they're going to do. But I think, yeah, you have an opportunity, if you're Adam Fox, to rehab an upper body while getting some juice back in the legs. I honestly think that's never been his number one skill set, but to a point, he's explosive enough to cause a lot of confusion for a defending player. I mean, I know that full well, how deceptive he can be. And if that ticks down just a little bit, or the game rises up a little bit in pace, he's a little bit of a different player. We saw that in Four Nations. Unfortunately. But you can take that, and again, that's the fastest hockey that's ever been played. So he's a smart enough player where he can adjust. Maybe he gets injured and you can go get in the gym and do some things that are going to get you some pop back in your legs when you're eventually come back. So that could help if they can hold water. Like, look, I worked the game where they just got eviscerated. Because of course I was working the game. I think they've won once since when I've been on MSG.
Oh, geez. Don't be putting that out into existence. You won't work another day.
I know. It's tough. The bounce back was big, but if they can rip off a few wins, you got it. They're big. I think they're emotionally, this team, when they're feeling it, they're really, really, they're a much better team. And I think if you can get through what you got through in terms of the, putrid 4-15, whatever it was, and different guys might have different roles, I honestly think it can be a positive, even when there's injuries. It's different players taking ownership and finding their own different confidences, and then use that time wisely. If you're Adam Fox, just getting back to him, I think, Mika got on the board in Four Nations. I'd love to see when Mika gets on the board. He looks 20 pounds lighter when he scores a goal, right? Mm-hmm. These are good things. I don't think it's going to hurt any of the Four Nations guys having that experience. I just think it's incredible hockey, and being around players that are that highly talented and motivated, they can bring that back to the club.
Look, I also think about Adam, and look, if they make the playoffs, and let's face it, they're not battling the 94 Rangers or the 82 Islanders or the 87 Oilers for those spots. I mean, they're Columbus, these are all flawed teams. Right. Ottawa has lost 5 straight in regulation when they could have put a stranglehold on their on the security of making the playoffs for the first time in forever, and they've lost 5 straight. So we're talking about flawed teams, and the Rangers, with or without Adam Fox, should be able to hang in there. I also think that Adam really needs a long summer. I think, I think, and I've said this, I wrote this, I put it on, I also tweeted on Twitter yesterday, that I just don't think he's been quite the same since the double knee injury. Like, he was just coming back when he got the knee on knee again in the playoffs in the first game. And I just don't think, they went late. It was already June. So he didn't have he didn't have a long summer. I think Adam needs a long summer. Now that, if the Rangers go on a run, he won't have that. But I do think he needs to get back to 100% health. His first month last season, I thought he was playing the best hockey of his career. And I think it's just been a little bit different since he's come back. He came back, after about a month last year, and everyone acknowledged that he was catching up all year. And just when he caught up, he was injured again. So, I think that people looked at Four Nations at Adam, and he had trouble. There's no doubt. Look, I thought his battle was excellent. He was winning one-on-ones. He was competing. There was no question about his effort and his commitment, but he just had trouble keeping up. And it started in the first period of the first game in Finland. And that was kind of the takeaway from almost everybody who watched the tournament. Is like, what happened to Adam Fox? And we know he's a proud guy. He's an elite player. And I would imagine he has not appreciated all of the talk that's been going around the league about the way he looked at Four Nations. So I think he'll be not that he's never motivated. He's always motivated, but I think this will add something to it.
Yeah,
What do you
so
think,
I mean,
Mollie?
like sticking with the broader conversation, I mean, you mentioned it. I feel like the conversation around Fox this season as a whole hasn't been inherently positive. And I feel like the Four Nations really exasperated the situation. It really put a pretty big spotlight on it. So I'm curious, Brian, what was your assessment of Fox at Four Nations?
Yeah, I mean, he didn't look like a lot of the other D for stretches of time. I thought, I mean, to Larry's point, yeah, he did everything he could to battle. He's such a intuitive player. It was just it was breakneck speed. That was the fastest hockey again ever, but it also was the straight line hockey. There was a lot of dump ins from, Braden Point had space on a 2-on-2 and dumped it into the corner.
Mm-hmm.
It's a recipe for success in big games. It's the same thing that wins every year. Can you get behind their D and can you get inside towards the net and can you keep them out? And that's all it was. And for him, I mean, it's hard to gap up when it's a game of ping pong for a while. It's hard to kind of get a read and use your intuition in a 4-game segment. If you haven't really done it in a while, there's a lot more possession and East-West play in the NHL now than there ever has been during the regular season. And he's thrived at that. He's super skilled, but this was a different brand of hockey. And it was an adjustment for him that, anybody, these guys aren't anybody, right? So across the board, I would say maybe other than a few Finnish defensemen, like these guys are the elite of the elite. So when whatever I criticize about these guys, it's like with the caveat that I'm never going to sniff or ever could have sniffed how good these guys are. So it's really hard to criticize it. But when you watch it all, this is best on best. You can see deficiencies in different guys, but they're so motivated. They're a different breed of people that's going to make Adam Fox better. That's going to make, a Chris Kreider better. That's going to make, like Connor McDavid he looked human in the final. Like, what is going on with this guy? Jack Hughes was a Zamboni on the ice. Like, he was all over the ice. And
yeah. And, in the first Canada-US game, it was like, what? Like, Nathan McKinnon couldn't do anything. They took him out. And my overarching takeaway from Four Nations was how invested every single player and every team was. They hit the ground running from day one of their practices, their media availabilities, and you could sense how important this was to them. Every player in that tournament, this was the priority for them. And it speaks to the decade or so of absence. There was an entire generation that never got to play best on best, and they were not going to allow this opportunity to slip away. They were invested in being their best. They were all invested in winning the tournament. It was a great advertisement, not only for the NHL but for the NHL players. This was a player-driven event. This was a player-driven tournament, and this was a player-driven success. So all commendations to the NHLPA who pressed for it, for Connor McDavid, who has become a major voice in the Players Association. Even going back to last year, he redid the entire All-Star skills, and it was the best in years. Of course, he won it.
He won $1 million.
He won it. But it is important And Brian, you can talk to, you went through a lot of labor battles when you played. I always thought it was so important for the best players to be leaders in the union. And there was a stretch where that wasn't happening at all. And now here's Connor McDavid. He's not talking about escrow. He's not talking about, CBA, labor, issues, but he's talking about what the players need and what the players want. And I just think it's another, it's another feather in Connor McDavid's cap. He's a, great player, but he's also a great representative of the NHLPA.
Yeah, I would like to thank all the players just for what they did for that. Just purely for me to be able to watch it. Like, that was just entertaining. But to your point, Larry, what they're doing for the league, it's not nickel and dimes over different things. There were things that really pissed us off as players, that like the first lockout and then the second lockout. Well, we did the math wrong. The owners come back to us and tell us that. And we're like, well, that's kind of a you problem, isn't it? And all the different things, the expansion coming in and we don't touch it, all these things that would piss us off. But now we've sort of met halfway and said, how do we make the product better? And we want that as well as players. We did, and we do now, or they do now, because I have to remind myself I'm not one, but it's everybody's in collaboration to make the product better. Mm-hmm. And when everybody's pulling on the same rope, everybody eats. And that's what we saw was unbelievable. I don't know what they're going to do with the Olympics. I've heard rumblings that they might tinker with some of the on-ice rules. I don't know if that's true or not. That would be pretty epic if the Olympics turned to NHL rules, but I don't know if that might be a pipe dream of mine. I just think going forward, capitalize on this momentum. You'll have a trade deadline, have some great playoff hockey again. There's a buzz about it, and it's really tremendous. So thank you to the players, thanks to the league, because that couldn't have been easy to do. There had to be detractors talking about 4 games in February. Why are we doing this?
Right.
It was a home run. You're right. Absolute grand slam.
There were so many doubters. There were so many people that for some reason, which was surprising to me, because any conversation with any player that's ever represented their country in international play, the way that they glow about it would let you know that they're going to care and they're going to put forth every possible effort to win. But people were thinking that it was going to be some glorified all-star game, which was super surprising. And now we got Matthew Tkachuk going on Jimmy Fallon. And we got the Tkachuk brothers on the Travis Kelce podcast with his brother. Like, that is more publicity than we've seen for the National Hockey League in so long. And I will give the league a lot of credit. I feel like this year in particular, they've done fun commercials with some of the big players. They're starting to realize that stuff is important. I don't know if it's just now becoming a realization or why it's now being pushed forth, but thankfully it is, because they have lost so much ground in the big sports league race, and it reflects obviously in a lot of different places. So I think it was an absolute home run for the NHL. It was a home run for the players, and what an awesome time it was for us to be a part of it too. Even just being there inside Bell Center, inside TD Garden, it was an awesome experience, and it was a lot of fun.
The league has always done special events very, very well. Yeah. They've done the outdoor games exceptionally well. But I also think that when there's criticism, they don't know how to market the stars. They don't know how to market the stars. They don't know, they don't know how to market the stars. The stars market themselves on the ice by their play. It's still a league, and I hope it's always a league, where the crest on the front means a lot more than the name plate on the back. And I think, this is the culture. This is the ethos that you learn it when you're growing up through 10U and 12U and 14U and that's that's the culture that hockey is. And so what's the sport now that's being bashed the most? The NBA, right? The league that's being bashed all the time. And they've all and if you can look the last 5, 8 years, 10 years, they've always been credited for how well they market the individual players. But now here's the league, the players don't play in more than 65 games. I think, load management, in my opinion.
Workload management.
Load management, in my opinion, has destroyed the NBA.
Yeah.
It just has.
No.
It's so hockey players market themselves with their skills. And then from that, here are the Tkachuks who are national celebrities. All of a sudden, here are the Tkachuks, and that's what happens when you have this kind of competition, when you expose people to how great this game is at the highest level. Then there are stars who stars are made on the ice, and they can and then they can go on to their podcasts.
There are those Tkachuk boys.
Oh, guy, what can I say?
You're right. They're going to have no issue finding work when they're done. They are they're so smart. Like the hockey IQ of Matthew Tkachuk, when to do things, how to push buttons, how to go to a franchise that's had talent and turn them into a contender. By trading away a franchise player, you got a different franchise player. And that guy, I didn't expect him to turn that culture around like he did.
But you knew he was going to have a major impact.
For sure, but I didn't know that. He's 27 years old. I thought he's 35 by now. He is that magnetic. He has been talked about that much. He is the skill level and how he gets around the ice. His brain is operating at a much higher level. And then he knows. He takes the temperature of his team. He looks around the bench. I'm going to go do something crazy right now, and I'm going to get everybody involved when he has to. Or I'm going to keep my mouth shut here. They're going to expect me to do something, and I'm going to draw a penalty. It's uncanny. And then his brother might be the strongest man on earth.
He's amazing.
He's a beast.
Run into the guy, and I'm like,
he's an absolute beast.
He's freakish.
Yeah.
It's insane, and he's younger.
Yeah. Whoever over at USA Today or the NHL, whoever it was that thought it would be a good idea to put them next to each other for their podium press conference deserves a raise, because it was theater. It was pure theater. And that's the type of stuff that gets noticed, that brings in new fans. I mean, I think it was Pierre LeBrun asking, did you go into the game knowing that you wanted to do that? Start fights? And Brady's like, there was some discussion throughout the day. Matthew's like, tell him the truth. Just tell him the truth. Just tell them. Just tell him. And he's like, oh yeah, well, there was a group chat going on, that kind of stuff. And then Brandon Hagel posting the picture of the Canada group chat at the end after they won. I mean, it's all people like the drama. They love the fun. That's just fun to people. It brings people in. So I think it was smash it. Yeah.
It's going to build for next time.
Yeah, it's going to build for next time. It's going to build for the World Cup. It's
these guys can play.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. They can play the game at an elite level, and then smash you in the face, and then everybody's watching. All the detractors from the physicality and the violence and the fighting in hockey. Look what that one game at the Bell Center Saturday night did.
Look what those 9 seconds did.
9 seconds.
Honestly, 9. They inscribed 9 seconds into hockey history. They just did. It was, and here's JT.
Watching himself.
Desperate to get into it, and he's fighting a guy who's like 7 inches taller, and he has
legit double his size. Double his size.
But that was the beauty of it, and I'm watching
it was great.
In my basement, screaming my head off.
Yeah,
my 9-year-old's looking at the screen, looking at me like, "What is this?" I'm like, "It's the greatest thing ever." And he's like,
"It was great. It was great."
So we can do that. I'm like, "No, you can't do that because you're 9." But I wouldn't be mad at you if you did. Man,
it was great. It was everything. The quality of the product was phenomenal. And I mean, on sticking with the Tkachuks, I mean, the thing that everybody says about them, at least on that team, is that they drag you into the fight. They will drag an entire team with them into the fight, and it totally showed out on the ice. I mean, what an amazing few games. And it felt like every game was great. Not even USA, Canada, all of them.
Yeah. And Brian, just, you got to watch players at this level, and you knew, that Dylan Larkin's is a big time player, but he's never played in any big games, right? I mean, he's been on a bad to middling team for his entire career. And then you're watching Dylan Larkin and you say, wow, this guy, he is elite.
Yeah.
And you watch Brock Faber and it was like, wow, Brock Faber is going to be a Norris Trophy contender for the next 5 years.
Out of their mind.
And these guys, you focused on them in this competition, and you recognize just how elite they are. It was just, again, I might be gushing, but it was just a great 10 days for hockey. It was a great 10 days for the best players in the world.
Isn't it great to talk positive about things? I find myself talking negative about things. One more thing on the Tkachuks. They'll never ask you to do something that they're not willing to do. Mm-hmm. That's why I think they're such great leaders. Yeah. And I mean, again, I was so impressed with that. The other thing I was impressed by is there were other players that struggled at times. So you'd watch them closely if you could. And I wanted to see how they reacted, how they handled it, how they were going to be more determined on the next shift or whatnot. I mean, McDavid's a great example. He gets his chance and he buries it. But like even Austin Matthews and Jack Eichel, I watch him in the defensive zone and it doesn't quite go in for him. Jack Eichel's defensive zone in overtime and in throughout the tournament, his defensive, he was a wet mop on everything. He killed every play. I couldn't believe what I was watching in terms of his 200-foot game. Other guys that just might not have played a lot. Dylan Larkin's a great example. He played his first year in the playoffs. I was against him. Got pushed around a little bit. He was 19 or 20 years old. And then the next year, taking a face-off against him, he almost lifted me up off my stick as I'm coming down. I was skating away because I'd always call him D-Boss from that funny clip he has on the internet. He's skating away, and he just looks at me. He goes, D-Boss got in the gym this summer. And I'm like, this guy is unbelievable. I love this guy now. And he competes like a bastard all the time. Yeah. Poor guy needs some players because he has the drive, he has the leadership, and then you saw he was humble about where he was put.
He's got such leadership.
You're right. He was humble. There was no doubt. But Mollie, I mean, talking about Eichel, I was in a different part of the locker room, and you saw how Eichel was so angry after they lost that he just stormed off. He put his equipment away. It was a major win for Canada. It really was. And it was a tough loss for the U.S.
All right, switching gears back to the Rangers. One more small injury update. Keandre Miller also got hurt in the Islander game, but he was out there Thursday for practice in a red non-contact jersey, and he was taking regular reps next to Will Borgen. So it looks like he could be okay, could be good to go for the Maple Leaf game on Friday. So we'll have to wait and see for that. But I mean, as far as what we've seen from the team as a whole since the regular season resumed, I mean, that loss in Buffalo was a real bad start. I mean, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, the fact Igor Shesterkin gets pulled a little over 18 minutes in, he wasn't good. Team wasn't good in front of him. There was really nothing to them, and it was not a good start. And even the beginning, first 40 minutes in Pittsburgh wasn't that great either. So it wasn't exactly an encouraging first couple of performances back. I didn't watch the Islander game. I had to take a day off after being away for 15 days. So, but I mean, load management, that was 100% necessary. But I guess, Larry, do you think it's gotten much better since that Buffalo game, or was it just such a low bar to clear that anything was going to be
it was a
better?
pretty low bar to clear. I think the most encouraging, listen, at this point of the season, it's not about process, it's about results. Like for the first 50 or 60 games, it's equally about process as it is about results, right? But now, you'll take every point you can get. It doesn't matter how you get them. But I thought the most encouraging thing about both victories against Pittsburgh and the Islanders was Shesterkin. They're not going anywhere if Igor Shesterkin is an average goalie, which he had been again for his previous couple of weeks before he was injured before the break. He's had too many of these stretches this year, and I recognize that they are deficient in their defensive structure. I recognize they're deficient in their 200-foot game, but when you represent yourself as the best goalie in the world, or one of the 3 to 5 most elite goalies in the world, you have to rise above that. And that's what he did in Pittsburgh, and that's what he did on the island. And so to me, it's like there can't be any more blips the rest of the season. There's 24 games to go. He'll probably play 18 of them. You can have a bad game or so, but you can't be bouncing up and down. You can't have a series of games where you have an 870 save percentage. You have to be the best player. He has to be their best player the way Lundqvist was their best player almost every night. And so to me, if you're taking anything away, it's like they know how to win games. And I think it was kind of like in October, they weren't playing well, but they were winning games on Shesterkin, quick, and almost muscle memory. They're a veteran team that knows how to win games. And I think part of that has come back. I think there are players playing better, certainly, but they're going to have to be led by Shesterkin if they're going to do anything. If they're going to make the playoffs, and if they have any chance to win a round, they're going to be playing a much stronger team in the first round. It's on Igor, and so that's I think the most positive signs from their last 2 victories.
Yeah, just some consistency. Just know what you're having, and he's maybe that is what's in front of him. But yeah, I mean, we talked about it. Me and Hank talked about it more so the Buffalo game. But you're right. It's kind of on him. He wanted that deal was talked about for months, it seemed, and now he's got it, and he earned that from what he's done and what he did in the playoffs last year. But you can't ghost. Now there was a layoff, and he was nursing something, but that's part of the gig when you're a superstar, and there's no real room for excuses. That one he just looked off, but his game has to build, and everyone else's does as well. And again, it's if you have that asset, and I'm one of the skaters in front of him, give him the least dangerous thing. Let him see it. He finds his game that way. You don't need to try and go score 4, period. Get back to the speed game, a game that you can play faster. It doesn't necessarily mean you skate faster or you zigzag or you look like the Globetrotters. It's a top to bottom problem with the consistency. And I think if they just have their foundational game that they can build on, they're just scattered. They're like, well, maybe it's the power play, or maybe it's this line's not working, or maybe we got to trade Kako, or maybe we got all these different distractions that have come up. The one constant was you'd hope Igor would just find his game. Now, and that's not a question. It's what is this team then if he can't bail us out of a 5-minute stretch in Buffalo? It's troubling, but if he can bounce back, that's a good sign.
Brian, for a team that's in the position that the Rangers are, I'm wondering how cognizant are the players in that room of knowing that their performances in this stretch of game probably determines how management is going to approach the trade deadline, or is going to start mapping things out for the end of the season and the future. Like how much does that weigh on a team when you're in that position, if at all?
I mean, it can, but you put yourself in that position. I mean, I remember talking to Steve Eiserman in my third year in Tampa, and we had a terrible luck with injuries. And this was after we had played 7 playoff rounds of 2 prior seasons combined. And he's looking at our schedule as he's talking to me and pointing at games, and without saying it, just being like, we need to be in a spot basically by this day, sort of comfortably, or I have to make moves. And he started the conversation off with like, I don't know if I'm going to extend you or I have to trade you. I don't know yet. So we'll have to see. And then he starts looking at the schedule. So I was very aware, and we lost a game to Calgary. We lost a game to Calgary at home. We had Ottawa 2 days later. And I took a long time to get my gear off after that game in Calgary, because I knew this was 3 games before the deadline. That one really hurt us, and I'm probably gone. Now, the next day, he traded Ben Bishop as our goalie. Didn't trade me. Went for my nap the following day after that, before we were going to play Ottawa. And he woke me up from my nap, told me I was traded. And I just knew for a day and a half. I knew it was coming. Yeah. And it's not a good feeling. So if you can avoid it by playing well, avoid it. It's hard.
Larry, what do you feel like this Rangers team has signaled to Drury going into the trade deadline? Do you think that they've shown enough, not enough? Where do you think that they're at?
I don't think they've shown enough for him to become a buyer. I think they're a marginal playoff team. Should be a little bit better than that. But even over the weekend, even the last 3 games, what's going on with Panarin? What's going on with Lafreniere? I mean, Lafreniere is just on the ice for goals against. So is Artemi. I don't think there's any signal that Chris Drury should become a buyer. Again, I think the injuries may have or the Fox injury may have an impact, but I don't think it should. I think, look, if they can make their way in, and again, like I said, they're back. They're not playing. These teams are flawed, just like the Rangers are. So if they can make it, fine, and then you start 0-0 in the first round, and you see what you can do. But I don't think there's any legitimate reason to change the direction going into the deadline. Again, it's, to me, and I thought it was about I thought this about the JT Miller acquisition. He'll make them better this year, but it's more for next year and the year after, when he becomes maybe the flag bearer for this team. So I think everything is more about next season, firming up next season when you're going into the summer, rather than trying to make some sort of a miracle run after you've seen for 58 games. They are where they are. They're a middle tier team in the NHL. That's not a very good league this year. There are a lot of middle and lower tier teams this league, this season in this league. So I think they that's what they are. Can they be better? Yeah. I mean, is there more there? We've thought so all year.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I've seen teams take off late, but if they can do it, more power to them, but not by injuring, anything they might have in store for next season. Like you just can't.
Alrighty. Well, that sounds like a good place for us to stop. Thank everybody for watching as always. You can give us a thumbs up down below if you're watching on YouTube. Leave us some comments. What did you think of the Four Nations break, about the tournament? Thoughts on Adam Fox's injury, what you would like to see from the team going forward. And that's it. We'll see you again next week.